Hey, this episode is brought to you in part by Signature Doors and Windows. Now, onto the show. So that's what made you an architect? Just that?
No, what actually started it was my dad said, I want you to be an engineer. You should be an engineer because I wanted to be an engineer. I said, I don't want to be an engineer. All right, I'll be an architect. It was that dumb. It was that simple. And I've been doing that since I was an early teenager in one way or another, and I've been too stupid to stop.
Hi. Hello.
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 Hello, and welcome to Architecting.
Hey, good evening. Good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome to Architecting. I'm Rebecca Wagner here with the host, Adam Wagner. Hey, Adam, who's on the podcast today?
Another good morning, good evening, another pull you out of bed to do this late night.
I wasn't even in bed yet.
9:21. Still out of bed. Let's see. What was the question? Yeah. So today we have Adrian Sopher and Erin Bagnall on the show. This is an interesting combo here. We have the two principals of Sopher Sparn Architects, and I think we've hit on this topic a few times about sort of firm transitions, and this is a good case of one of them here, where we have one of the named partners, the remaining named partner that's in the firm, and handing the torch over to the next generation of architects, of principals, and seeing and hearing about their partnership and how they're both steering the firm and how they're thinking about moving towards the future, but then also hearing these stories from the past.
Cool. Sounds interesting.
And this episode is being released on October 18th, and we are having a release show party on the 19th, so on Thursday. So if you happen to hear this, come on down to Sopher Sparn's Denver office for a happy hour around 4:30 to 7 or whenever they kick us out of the office, and you can get more information on our Instagram site. So listen to the episode, come down in person, talk to these great architects, drink some of their alcohol, and meet someone new.
Keep connecting.
Sounds good. Enjoy. But first, here's a few messages from our sponsors. Hey, we're happy to be sponsored by Modern in Denver magazine. For over a decade, they've been crafting fantastically curated content on Colorado designers and projects, spreading the gospel of good design within our region.
And I love how the goal of Modern in Denver aligns with the goal of this podcast, to better build up and connect the community of Colorado designers. So go buy a copy of the magazine at your local bookstand, subscribe to their weekly email list, and follow them on Instagram.
Check it out. And now, back to the show. Thanks for coming on here, you guys. And yeah, this is fun. This is like my favorite way to meet people, where you get it on record and push out that awkwardness. But we'll start off and make it awkward in the very beginning. But we have one question, and it's, who are you? And I think, you can answer it as a partnership or individually, but it's kind of like a party sketch of who are you in a few sentences.
EB, you got to go first.
I don't know. I thought you had notes. Who are you? I'm not a woman of 2 or 3 sentences to describe myself. So I'm just going to say that I'm a community-driven architect.
Nice. When you said that, I thought you were going to go for 5 minutes talking about it, but that nice and concise. You don't even need 2 sentences. Nice. Adrian, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to presume that you're asking this in the context of me being an architect.
No, this is you take it however you want. So this is how you framing,
Well, I would say that broadly, I have come to learn to not worry about who I am, as it serves me little and it serves my clients less.
Mm.
And so I try not to focus on that, as I have found that just complicates my life, and I'm much more interested in how I can understand the world that I'm in than I am about who I am.
So that's interesting. So let's talk about that journey. So where'd you start off? Where'd you grow up? Are you checking your notes?
No, I was cleaning my desk.
Okay.
I was distracting myself. I was born in India, lived there. I left before I was 2, and I grew up in LA. And my family, well, they're Sephardic Jews from India, and there aren't too many of them. And so we're immigrants that basically my dad brought over his entire family and my mother's family, and over the remaining decades of life that he had. And I basically wasn't quite sure about what my community was, but it didn't seem to matter. It was all a big question mark for me. So
what part of India?
Calcutta.
Where are they from? Oh, okay.
Calcutta by way of Iraq, and my mother was actually born in Burma.
Oh, interesting.
And
Right before.
And her father was from Burma. My mother was from Calcutta, but she went to school in Shanghai. My grandmother was in school in Shanghai. So all over that part of the world.
Wow.
And I don't know if you know what Sephardic Jews are, but they're the Jews that left Spain during the Inquisition.
Oh, interesting. And made their way to kind of Persia,
North Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, China, Indonesia, and into France too, for that matter.
And so then when you moved to LA, was there still that kind of group of like that diaspora there of kind of community?
Yes, and I was related, I'm sure, to all of them. But yeah.
Interesting. So what did your parents do? What was kind of surrounded you growing up?
My dad never quite pulled off whatever it was that he thought he was trying to do. And my mom kept everything together.
What were some of those things he was trying to do?
I don't have any idea what to say about it.
Interesting. So that's what made you an architect? Just that?
No. What actually started it was my dad said, I want you to be an engineer. You should be an engineer, because I wanted to be an engineer. I said, I don't want to be an engineer. All right, I'll be an architect. Was that dumb? It was that dumb. It was that simple. And I've been doing that since I was an early teenager in one way or another, and I've been too stupid to stop.
I like that. That would probably be the quote in the beginning of the podcast here.
Well, I'll tell you,
He's gonna have
it's beneficial, because if I were smarter, I would have given up working on it.
Engineer.
He does that, but he loves it.
Yeah. So he said engineer, and you said no, architect, and so where did you go to school? Where'd you start off?
Undergraduate at USC. And then I took 4 years after that working in Southeast Asia. I got a job in Southeast Asia. I was there for a year, and then I came back for another 3 years, and I realized I had no clue at what I was doing. And the job that I got, actually not too long after, I was sitting next to a guy that I knew in undergraduate school. He was a year ahead of me, and he went to graduate school at Princeton. And I won't tell you his name, but he was such a jerk. And I realized he loved to show me that I really didn't know what I was doing. And he was right. And so I decided I had to go to graduate school. And so I did.
Yeah, but those Princeton people are still the worst. But
I tell you, I didn't apply to Princeton.
What?
I didn't apply to Princeton.
Yeah. I just say that because I did apply to Princeton and they didn't let me in. So, it.
I was sure I didn't want to go to Princeton.
What was the kind of atmosphere around USC when you went there? And I mean, then going off and moving out of country, what kind of set up that path?
There were a few people at USC that I could understand what they were talking about, but most of the time I had no clue. No clue. And actually, one thing that really stuck out for me was, I think it was after my first year, there was a structural engineer who was a part of the faculty, And I really liked him. He was a great guy. He was Russian. He was about 6'4". His name was Dmitry Vergun. And he always smoked a cigar in studio. And we had sort of closing interviews at the end of the year. And he said to me, I really think you ought to think about doing something else. And I really appreciated him doing that, because I just said, I don't know what I can say on this podcast, but you can imagine what I thought. And that really helped me.
Yeah. And that was at the end. That was
the end of the first year, I think.
Oh, end of the first year. So then what'd you do with that? How'd you take that comment? And
I said,
differently?
Fuck you, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Nice. And so it was more of the stimulating you to push forward than.
Yeah, but I also understood why he said it.
It
made some sense to me.
Yeah. And so then when you got out, what was in Southeast Asia?
There was no work. There was it was after the first Arab oil embargo, and there was literally nothing. And I got a job working as the assistant to the clerk of the works on a hospital project in LA. And I don't know if you know what the clerk of the works is, but it's basically someone like an owner's rep. And my job was just to observe construction. And I ran into a guy that I knew in school who was older. He was a transfer student and a little older. And he said, well, what are you doing? I told him, this is what I'm doing. He said, well, I just saw an ad where they're looking for architects, people with a degree in architecture that are 25 years or older, and something else. Experience in construction administration. Yeah, that's what it was. Experience in construction administration. I said, well, I'm 21. I don't have experience in construction administration. And I have a degree in architecture. He said, well, you should apply.
Yeah.
So I did. And it was for, I was the 30th person the guy interviewed. And I had on my resume Emmett Wemple, who was a landscape architect and had been a teacher at USC for 30 years. And he said, oh, I was a student of Emmett's. He hired 2 people, and both of us had Emmett on their resumes.
Wow.
And within a week, I was in Borneo doing construction administration on American oil worker housing.
Whoa. It's not what I was thinking. Yeah.
But enough about me. There's somebody else here.
I love having 2 partners on here, and especially I think this is the first partnership where I have kind of first generation and second generation at the same time. But it is hard to cut off a trail. But yeah, let's jump to you, Erin. So where did you grow up? Do you also grew up in India, and kind of the same story, or
my story is going to be a little bit more basic.
Yeah. I think most of ours are compared to that.
I'm from Virginia. My family, all of my, known family is from Virginia, rural areas, and settled in Tidewater. Although I have some roots in Vermont, but mostly just the Virginia area. And my dad was he was a contractor growing up. So I spent a lot of time going with my mom and my dad and my sister to building sites, construction sites. He would always want to go look at the homes that were being built because he was curious. And so I think that's what initially got me interested in. I've always really, really loved art and painting and math. So it's sort of a trajectory that took me into this realm to see what it was. But I went to undergrad at UVA.
Nice.
And I remember going there and thinking, maybe this is what you were talking about, Adrian, where I just didn't know what they were talking about in this theory of the world. And, I do now, but going into there, I thought that everyone else knew what was going on. And I had a lot of catching up to do. So I kind of invited myself on this exemplary student trip to Italy, my second semester of my first year.
Oh, wow.
And a professor named John Mays, he invited all of his favorite students, and I was not one of them. But I went into his office one day and I convinced him to take me along. And I remember asking my parents if I could go, and they said, well, gosh, we've never even been out of the country. This is the family that I like. They were excited for me, but then at the same time wondering why they have never gotten to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Italy with my architecture friends, and it was fantastic, and I got a chance to travel and see architecture, and that's all just to say that I'm continually learning on the architecture train, and it's one of the things that, and Adrian and I talk about this all the time, it's one of the professions where you learn something new every single day. You're constantly solving problems and learning how to come up with solutions. So it keeps us all engaged and it keeps us all interested.
Yeah, that's interesting of going to Italy so early. It seems it's a pretty typical experience, but normally kind of fourth year or fifth year or something. But of getting in there and broadening is interesting. Like my dad was a contractor as well, and I went to architecture school so I could be a better contractor. When I got out, that was my idea. And then 2 weeks in, I was like, there's a lot more to architecture than single family homes in the middle of Kansas, like I was going to be doing. But it is, yeah, it was a real mind shift, right? Of coming in. What was sort of like that idea, where you said, I didn't know that what they were talking about. I do now, but I didn't know then. It's like,
well, I know a little bit more about what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. But like, leaving UVA, it's such obviously like a nest of architecture in itself, just the environment and the buildings. What was the kind of biggest takeaway that you had from there and moving on?
Like you said, it is a nest of, historic architecture, and the architectural program is very theory based and hand drawing. We always hand drew everything. I mean, that was however long ago it was, which is a long time ago. But there were CAD programs that they didn't initially want us to even touch, which I appreciate, because it was taking the creative mind and a program or a place or whatever it was that the studio was presenting, and allowing you to go somewhere else with it in this theory, wherever that really took you. And it pushed me to expand on theory more than I comfortably would. And then I think I can take that as a learning lesson and do with it what I'm comfortable doing nowadays. So I can push my boundaries only so much in terms of convincing myself that this party or building is going to exactly replicate this theoretical program or paragraph that you might describe it on. But I think it's useful to start there.
Yeah. And so you grabbed onto that, and then what, you take a few years off, then went to grad school? What was that?
Yeah, I went to as soon as I got out of Virginia undergrad, that summer I worked at Monticello.
Oh,
and
really?
then I got my car and followed my friend who was immediately going into architecture school at Berkeley. And I followed him and some other architecture friends to the Bay Area and worked in interior design in the Bay Area for a little bit for a woman named Bauer Interior Design. Also, all hand drawing and really custom homes. I saw a lot of wealth that I had never even seen prior in my entire career. A lot of homes in Monterey Bay and on the water, and realized that there can be a lot of wealth in architecture that I constantly kind of struggle with personally, and the kind of the reason that I gravitate towards a little bit more of a community-based and affordable housing-based architecture. It makes me feel comfortable knowing that I can do something that helps a lot of different people rather than something that just helps one single family or person.
Yeah.
And then I worked in the Bay Area, and then I came to Colorado. I started heading east, and my boyfriend then, husband at the time, boyfriend then, husband now, was living in Boulder. And so I stopped here and never left. And I went to CU Denver for grad school.
Car broke down and stayed in the middle of the country. And
Yeah.
Why'd you want to go there, and what did that give you, that experience give you that you were kind of lacking?
At CU Denver, it was really a practical, I enjoyed the practical education that was given there. It was lacking, I never really, it was a really, really boring MEP class that I would hope to never take again. But that was something that they never even offer at UVA. So it was like a yin and a yang of education that I think was useful. And I met a mentor in my professional practice class, Rich von Luter, who was of RNL. And he helped me. He basically just shepherded my career after graduation and helped me get a job at RNL and still communicate with to this day. I appreciate that about the opportunities at CU Denver to really get connection with the Denver community.
Yeah, it's a small enough place. Like if you're able to connect in with one of those influential instructors or professionals, yeah, powerful. So Adrian, you're not off the hook. I want to hear about grad school. So you took the 4 years off, and then you went to Penn, right?
Yeah.
You have any good stories from there? What was going on at that time?
Well, this was Khan had died some years earlier, not so long earlier that there wasn't, I guess, not so much a hangover, but there was an afterglow or a hangover, depending on who you were.
Right.
And I got lucky, and in terms of the people that I met everybody, but I felt very much drawn to certain group of instructors that came out of his lineage and appreciated that. I did not gravitate towards the Venturi crowd, which was also pretty strong at that time. And so I had 2 or 3 really great teachers. And I felt like for the first time, I actually had teachers. In other words, people that could speak in a language that I could understand and that made sense to me, and didn't tell me what to do, but they created an atmosphere that I could explore for myself what started to make sense. And I drew a lot. I mean, it was very earthy in that regard. I mean, I still have all these drawings that you don't do that anymore. And it was the one in particular who I looked up a year ago before we went to this part of the world to see if I could find him again. And I didn't really. I'm trying to remember his name. Gosh, he was Belgian. He would come every year for a semester. I guess he had a strong connection to Aldo van Eyck, who would also come every year. And basically, what he would try to get us to do was to draw the city. And he was very vague about what that meant. But draw what you see, draw your understanding of the city. And then he'd talk about that, but he wouldn't tell us what he meant, really. We had to find for ourselves what that meant to us. And it was very challenging, but also very provocative in a way that made me start to look at things that I hadn't put pieces together with. And I started to learn about the nature, for me, of what are the elements of the structure of a city in terms of what was the nature of one street versus a different street, and how do they relate to one another, and how do they relate to landform, and how do they relate to railroads or other forms of communication and transportation, and what happens if you take a red line and a blue line and a purple line, and how do they relate to one another in reality? Can you shift those dynamics? And what happens when you do? And how do you interlace green into that? Is there a relationship between railroad lines and green lines? Is there a relationship? And I started to recognize that all of these things had different forms in different places. And they start to define how we respond as human beings in relation to those. And that was fascinating to me.
It's like I just love school where you can get into that sort of level, right? And you can be thinking about that level, but then you get shoved out into profession and I guess like taking that, what you're talking about, right? Like we can be thinking about the smaller pieces that we're adding to these and thinking about how it relates to this overall sort of idea of fabric and piece and parts. But that's if you're lucky, right? And to be able to affect change at a larger scale, like you're able to study in school, is challenging, right?
What I think I learned more than anything else is to look. To look and see what arises in that process. And it doesn't much matter what you're looking at. You could be looking at how city government is structured and how you relate to the neighborhood that you're working in and what are their priorities and how does this piece of land respond to all of those priorities that are impacting it, and how do you learn that? Because you can really make dumb mistakes too.
Right. So then you came out of there with the head of steam and hit right into what?
No. I came out of there with into the second airborne embargo.
Oh, nice. You're supposed to go to school during those things, during those recessions, not graduate.
Yeah. But what I really came out of there was recognizing that I had just had a couple of real teachers, and that I was just getting started in my education. And I knew I wasn't done. So that was very provocative for me, and it affected how I move forward in my life quite a bit.
Yeah. So what'd you do with that then? What came next?
I ran into Buddhism. And I realized that what my teachers were talking about, they didn't even know that what they were talking about was scratching the surface of some things that I started to look into more deeply in a broader context.
Interesting. When did Sopher Sparn come about?
Oh God.
So when did the car break down in Boulder for you?
My wife, I actually came out here because I was part of the Buddhist community when I was living in Philadelphia and Boston. Also, when I got out of graduate school, I couldn't find work in Philadelphia, but I ran into one of my old teachers. He said, "We got to try Boston. Boston's a nice place. You'll like Boston." So I went up to Boston, couldn't find work there. And I was imitating his Cuban accent, by the way. He was a wonderful 60-year-old Cuban architect, always spoke in a very high voice. And he said, "Go to Boston, you'll like Boston." And so I went to Boston, couldn't find any work there again. So I came back to Philadelphia and had an interview. And he said, "Well, we don't have any work here, but we got this project in Boston." So I said, "Okay, I'll go." And so I worked on the Red Line, the MTA Cambridge station in Boston for a year. And then I came back down to Philadelphia and things started opening up. But in the process, I came in direct contact with the Buddhist community there and have been ever since, and met my wife on a retreat. We were both on staff at a 3-month retreat in the Rockies. That was in 1988.
And then that brought you out here. Yeah. And so Erin, so you graduated and probably no oil embargo.
Well, I forgot to mention that the second week after being I just moved across the country into the Bay Area. 2 weeks later, September 11th happened.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So everything sort of changed as we all know how it did. And those that had come to the Bay Area to go to school were in luck, but those that were looking for jobs had a little bit harder time. So that's how I ended up in the interior design firm.
But then after graduate school, where did that wave, that sort of, I guess, practical wave in a certain way of CU, like you were explaining it, like where'd that take you?
Well, it took me with Rich Bermuder. He brought me under his wing to R&L, which was downtown at the time, 16th Street, pretty large firm, had all the divisions and spec graders and the electricians and the plumbing and the mechanical. But I was in the design studio and I stayed there for a while. And John Rogers was there. He was, one of the founding members, but he would kind of roll in sometimes and see how things were going. So I got close to him. He would take me out to lunch, and that was much appreciated. But after probably about a year or 2 years there, I'd been working on a lot of larger fun projects, but nothing was in Denver. Had yet to work on anything local. I was working on things in Vegas, and nothing that I could had any sort of tangible idea of what was going on or what the site was even. So I said I was living in Boulder and commuting to Denver every day, and I tried to find a job in Boulder, and I found a job at where Adrian's firm at the time, which was called Arc Inc. And they were in need of somebody coming to help because they had just recently gotten a pretty large project, an entitlement project in the city of Boulder. So I remember talking to John Rogers and telling him I was leaving. And he said, well, why are you going? Why are you going to Boulder? And I said, well, I want to, at the time, then I feel like this is what young people say. I want to work on single family homes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the answer I gave. And he said, oh, Erin, that's not where you're going to find your joy. I just know. And I didn't listen to him. And he kind of ended up being right. It wasn't where I found my joy. I do love single family homes, don't get me wrong. But where I found my joy and what took the kind of trajectory that move to Adrian's firm took me is immediately started working on this project called the Washington Village Community. And it was a project that Adrian was the lead on. He was on the planning board at the time. You can ask him about that part. But it was a really large development project, redevelopment of an existing school. So the Boulder Valley School District had sold the land. Adrian's going to maybe correct me on some of these things, but it was a school use and they sold the land and rezoned it. And it was a split zone site. And the person that purchased the property wanted to develop it for co-housing. Wanted more density than was really allowable. There's lots of really, really intricate land use issues that we had to jump through. And I'll let Adrian tell you the sordid history of that. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that I immediately jumped into this project with Adrian. He was on the planning board at the time. And we got a lot of experience in entitlement work and the public process, and sometimes contentious public process with development. And to this day, I think that is one of the things that we do best in Boulder, in the city of Boulder and the county, is help clients maximize or get things done that are a little bit outside of the realm of the land use code and require complicated entitlement work. And that's sort of what Adrian was speaking to, of this creative thinking of you take what your client needs to see, or the demands and the needs of your client, and you can, with your knowledge of being an architect in the land use code and all of the codes that are involved, the demands of the city and the temperature of the council even, and you help them get where they need to go.
Right. But you're thinking about it not in a way of skipping lines and squeezing through to help developers, but you're thinking about it in terms of how the lines are intersecting and how it's creating an overall place and selling that vision, I guess.
That's right. It's the it's the green and the blue and the yellow and the train and the railroad, and how all of those things come together, and how they can work. But you have to creatively get something there to work.
Right. So Adrian, was that sort of the vision when creating Arc Inc? What was the vision? Give me that story.
Yeah, I think at some level, I mean, I probably wouldn't put it in quite those terms, but there was that hope, which, my partner at the time had more of a expectation in that regard. I think for me, it was, well, that'd be great, if we could do that. But I think in some way, I feel closer to that now, so many years later, that I do more see the world of as how can I bring together the forces that are at play in a circumstance that really is helpful and can be accomplished. We were having a conversation the other day in the office with a couple of people who brought this proposal forward to Erin and Stephen and myself. And there were 3 options to look at. And the young woman said, well, I didn't think you were going to do any of those. And I said, well, wait a minute then. If you knew we weren't going to do it, why did you say that this is something we should do? If you know we're not going to do it, why not focus on the one option that has a chance of being accomplished? And let's see if we can do that and just explore that thing that has possibility in a manner that brings something good to fruition. And I think it's really important to recognize what is achievable. Not to say that you can't go further a little bit here or there in certain regards, or maybe push a bit to get a little more. But I think it's important also to understand what is the path that's going to get the best outcome with the least amount of suffering for everybody.
That idea of suffering is interesting, right? So you were saying essentially they were bringing in 3 design options, and 2 of them were sort of too radical in a way, or too.
Well, they weren't. It was an internal issue. It was an office issue,
right?
And she knows us well enough to know that we're not going to do the first 2. So my question to her is, why do you think it's beneficial to pursue the 2 that we're not going to do, instead of looking at the 3rd one and finding a way to get the best outcome that you could achieve?
Erin, what do you think about that? I just love to iterate, right? And I'm always throwing stuff out, and I'm like, this is dumb, this won't work, or whatever. And it's sometimes 10%, 20% of the time it's the one that ignites. But it is an interesting thing of do you?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a different idea for Adrian, because from my perspective, even though this person seemingly knew we wouldn't go for the first 2, I still think that the presentation and you got to give it a try, right? You can throw it out there and see if something sticks, even if you don't think it will. It might bring up other conversations. So, we're talking sort of generically about this one event, but I think I'm a little bit more open to hearing ideas.
Yeah. And I, in all fairness, I didn't mean to say that you shouldn't explore ideas, but I was more curious about what's going to be effective and how can we, when it's not going to be effective, when that that's not going to happen, let's look at what can be effective, because that is going to be the path in some way. It doesn't mean to say that we can't explore these things that might be interesting to help open our minds a bit.
Yeah, and he's right, and there's a balance, right? And it's client base. You know your audience, right? And your audience is who you're presenting to, and that's kind of what Adrian's talking about. Like, we in the office, we have a strong desire, and we would love to do a multi-story CLT building, and that's an option. Those are options that you don't always get presented with, and so we haven't necessarily pushed it in any way, but there is one specific client where we think this could be a good option for them. And there's a good story involved for the CLT and the sustainability, but there's also a bottom line number that they could probably appreciate, and it's going to get them their height that they need and their stories that they need within that height. And, it's potentially doable and potentially works for everyone. And so that's a situation where you come with a proposal that checks a lot of boxes and might actually get done.
Yeah, right. One of the biggest reasons I started this podcast was because I was starting my own firm and I just wanted to harvest information from other people who started a firm. So I keep trying to prod Adrian for it, and he's not taking the bait here. But like, what was the thing where you said, I need to start a firm because I can't do this at another firm? And what was that spark, and what was that kind of first few weeks like?
It was getting fired from R&L.
Okay.
Oh, it's funny that R&L is going to show up so much in this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was another time where I finished working on a project and there was another project. They were running out of work. And I went to myself, if I'm ever going to do this, this is the time to start. Just because I'm tired of looking for another job that I don't really like.
Right.
There also might have been some aspect of it where you felt like you had learned enough to do it. No? Not
No, I don't think that was
I don't think I've ever heard that story on this podcast. Yep, I got it all. Now let's do this. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Well, it takes a certain amount of comfort level.
But I did have this friend who was working in Boulder, and he had a thriving small practice, but he was limited in experience in things that I was less limited in. And he knew a lot of people in the community, and he was doing a lot of single family work. And I said, we ought to look at doing something together. And he liked that idea. And
who was that?
his name is Steve Vosper. We started a firm together in 94. And we called it Architecture Incorporated. And he wasn't licensed, I was, and so it had a certain synergy. We stayed in partnership for a long time. But I think I needed a certain amount of, like Dimitri Vergun, a certain amount of kick in the butt to say, all right, I need to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started working together and had a few projects that we could work on, and it was not easy. I mean, this was in the mid to late 90s. There was still some work in Boulder, and it was ebb and flow. So I don't know what to say.
How large did that firm grow into?
Had in the end, before we modified, it was, I guess there was about 6 of us, Erin.
A day at most.
Yeah, at most 5 to 6.
And then at a certain point, when Google became so prevalent, you figured you needed to change names so that people could find your firm.
No, there was another recession. I think it was Erin planned her twins properly.
I had twins at the very end of 2008.
Ah, nice.
And it saved us from having to
fire me.
Of people because we didn't have the work, honestly.
Right.
The firm reduced in size to I think 3 of us at the time, and then it just sort of naturally became apparent that Steve and I were fine with moving on. And then I started to get more work actually at that time. Projects were coming towards me. I'd finished my time on the planning board, and interestingly, things started to pick up, and I was getting some larger feasibility studies and projects, and it felt like Steve was fine doing single family stuff, and I was fine not doing that, and just opened a private practice with a couple of people, and then Erin came back after raising twins.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm still in that process.
She came back with 2 small interns, and
yeah. So it was 2008 when I had the twins, and obviously sounds like you have children, Adam. That was a lot. So it kind of worked out that there wasn't a lot of work going on at the time. So I took that time to take care of my babies and get my license. I hadn't gotten licensed yet. So that was for those 3 years, got licensed, took care of young ones. And then right at that time, things were starting to pick up and Adrian was getting busier. So it sort of organically flowed back into those projects that we're talking about.
And for Boulder, we started to get some sizable projects, and there was just 3 of us in the office, Erin, myself, and Paula at the time. And we had a nice little studio space on Colorado building, on the 6th floor of the Colorado building. And there was this wall as you came in that we had a big pin-up wall, and there were all these projects pinned up on there. And our clients would come in and they'd go, "You're working on that, and you're working on that, and you're working on that, and you're working on that. And there's 1, 2, 3 of you."
We each have 2 hands.
Yeah. And so we realized if we're going to do these projects, we probably need some help. And that's when Stephen, who had approached me a year or 2 earlier, I said, I think maybe it's time for us to talk about this again. And so we went into partnership in 2015, the beginning of 2015.
That's Sparn. You just like partnering with people named Steve.
Yes.
Well, there's Steve and there's Stephen, and they are not the same.
Yeah. But so what was that? So that was essentially came out of the idea of growth and needing to expand, or just needing to expand yourself in a way.
Well, we recognized that the work we had, we couldn't do on our own, and that we'd probably lose the work, or we'd have to farm it out or partner. And so Stephen had approached me. Well, I had known Stephen. Actually, we had rented space in Stephen's building when we first started Architecture Incorporated. So we'd known each other for quite a while, and he had felt that he needed to shift his practice, and that there might be a fit there. So it took me a while to say, okay, at least a year, because it felt like I didn't know why I was doing it. I'd just been in partnership for 17 years and particularly want to go into that casually.
Right.
But at the same time, I realized that something needed to shift. So we joined forces. And
how did that feel for you, Erin? Like seeing this kind of 2 cultures maybe come together, or approaches, and what did that change feel like, especially being so early on in the firm?
I think from my perspective, it was good. It was an advancement of, both of these firms together were creating a better whole. And we were able to get and accomplish more together than we had previously been. So, a 3-person firm is a lot different from what Stephen was at the time, which was 10.
It was about 6 or 7. So together we were about 10, maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
And so it was nice in the sense that he just had more support systems set up, in-house support systems set up that we weren't used to. And that was kind of nice to take advantage of. And I'm really just talking about, someone at the front desk, and, there's an accounts manager and all the stuff that when you're really small, you do everything. And as you get larger, those roles start to be less inclined to, you don't have to do all of it. You get to pass those things along.
Right. It's interesting with, being in a firm, especially if you've only worked for, a small handful of firms or something, you only know that small handful of ways to do things, right? And there's no like school of how to be an architect in that way. And so like it takes that outside person coming in and saying, no, like, you're not doing meeting notes. What are you doing? Or whatever, whatever it is. And filling in gaps. Yeah. And so now, we're so many years past here. And so the baton is being kind of passed off to the next generation. I see, it seems like obviously it's a big kind of topic. I guess it's probably always been, but it seems pertinent now in Denver of certain firms kind of passing down leadership and kind of what happens to that, especially, when there's people's names on the door or whatever, but how that gets passed down. So what's the process like, has been for you guys, and are you planning on just taking a few more half days, Adrian, like slowly, just half and half and half until?
Well, Erin keeps saying, well, are you working enough? I don't know if
I'm trying to hold him accountable.
Checking
she
his
wants
time
to know
sheet.
my hours and how much
Yeah.
vacation time I'm taking and I said,
Payback.
well, I'm not
I'm
sure.
just trying to understand this whole partnership thing.
Yeah.
I just to get back to your, there's no book on how to do this. I guess there are kind of maybe some books that we could have read, but in the end, you sort of have to navigate it through yourself. And we started this process, 3+ years ago, in just what started as, casual conversation. And then we were saying, we have to do something. We have to think about what this is going to look like. And it was a long process, but now we feel like once we've done this for one time, that it starts to sort of set the page or set the next page for when we do it the next time, and hopefully get it to be more streamlined and something that just can be built into the practice as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
But we got over this hurdle, and we were pretty proud of ourselves to get to that point.
I will say one other thing about that, though, is Erin was the obvious candidate for initial transition of leadership, but there were others that we had talked to, and what we realized that this is not a one size fits all process. It doesn't work that way, and that actually created in some way through the departure of two potential partners, because all of us didn't recognize that each person has their own needs and timing in that regard. So that was a big learning experience for us all.
Right. Yeah, it seems tricky in different ways.
We didn't expect that. Yeah.
I mean, it goes to sort of the idea of building something, right? Of you're building this firm. Adrian, you started it, partnered, it's got your names on it, but there's a lot of people doing the work, right? And creating this sense of itself. And with a lot of firms who have the name on it, it's like that person dies and it's like, well, what's the point of continuing? Like that they had the sketches or whatever, and it was that vision, right? But it seems like, you're saying that there's a core to this firm that means this, right? And we want to continue it and pass it down. And yeah, it can be hard, I guess, if you're building into that core, and then what's the future there for you or whatever. But to that rambling weird question, what's the core? What's the core that you have a sense of what that is that makes you guys special?
I can tell you,
yeah.
I'm not about to try and define that. And my view of it is, if there's interest in whatever you think it is, and there's an interest on somebody's part in pursuing that, there's an interest in our clients in supporting that, well, sure, that's fine. Let's go ahead and look at that. I'm not somebody who's going to worry about his legacy in that regard. It's just not going to happen. And if I can be helpful to others in making a good livelihood and a good professional offering, well, gee, why wouldn't I do that? It's particularly with someone who I've known for 18 years. I'm just, yeah, of course. But don't look at me and saying, this is what we did, this is who we are, and I want to see it go on for the next 500 years. It's not going to happen. Right.
What about you, Erin? Do you have, it's like you've poured so much of your life into this firm for why, what's the juice to it?
Well, I think it's nice to be in the position that we're in right now. As far as Adrian's concerned, there isn't a core that he's going to identify. So it opens up something for everybody else that wants to take this and mold it. We had a strategic planning retreat, and the entire office came and kind of started to present our mission and our vision and our values. And everybody has been on teams since that. We did it in January, and everybody is very engaged in their little groups. Some are focused on marketing, some are focused on HR relations, some operations, and they all are kind of creating this ownership on how we take our firm and make it better. And I've noticed a big shift in the firm in a positive direction since doing that, because everyone has an interest in where we're going from here, and it feels very familial, like a team.
And I just want to add, I think that's a really great point that Erin is bringing up, but I just want to add, I don't want to give you the wrong impression. I am the most opinionated person in the office, and I definitely make my opinions known. So it's not like I'm just this mush thing here, but
but we don't have to listen to him as much.
Yeah.
Because
hey, mush, quiet down. Yeah.
He's very opinionated, and in fact, relationship wise, I'm the only one that really can, I don't know, he can tolerate being, what's the word I'm looking for, Adrian?
Oh, I have no clue.
Reprimanded.
Yeah. Reprimanded.
Oh, yeah, she's a little bit quick to jump down my throat.
But back to yes, and I think there's an upward trajectory that we see in a lot of ways in this firm, in terms of interest levels and the projects we're getting and what we're producing and what we've done in the last 5 years, and capitalizing on that and taking it in this, I won't say new direction, but it's future path, and what that involves and who it involves is a pretty exciting place to be.
Yeah. Adrian, what gets you most excited about the future?
Well, I mean, I don't really think about the future. People ask me, are you retiring? Are you still working? Why are you still working? And it's
Erin keeps making me.
She said, what? Where are you? What are you doing? What are you working on? It's I still have so much that I enjoy exploring and trying to learn about. When I engage in something, it's always a challenge for me. How can I understand what's needed here? How can I craft something out of this? And it's never obvious to me. It's an exploration, and it's never easy. There's always something that is found in the process, and I appreciate that process of finding the next thing and then the next thing to learn and the next thing, and finding that I have to backtrack and see, am I assuming too much? Where do I have to go? Who do I have to talk to understand the needs and the circumstance better? And it's like getting to know my world and how to respond to it in a manner that can be beneficial and maybe even beautiful. Maybe, if I'm lucky.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I feel like just talking with people all the time, it's oh, I'm so frustrated. I don't know this yet, but like a few years and doing some CA, I'll get to know it or whatever, but that idea of sort of embracing I'll never figure out how to do this. And it's always in it, and it's the journey, not the destination, right? Like, has that been a thing that's been with you for a while, that sort of non-searching? Is it a Buddhist thing? Is it
I don't know what the destination looks like. I mean,
right.
One of your questions you asked was, do I ever step back and look at, I mean, who's got the time? Because you're always on to the next project and the next project and the next project before that first one that you were working on is done. And you kind of go, okay, I'm just going to keep moving forward. I hate to have the analogy of a shark, but you're continually moving forward into the next thing that you need to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's what Adrian's noting is an exciting part of the job and why
Right.
it keeps him coming around.
Yeah.
I don't think, Adrian, that you don't reflect on your past jobs because
Oh, yeah. I mean, as one of my old teachers would say, you do too many bad buildings, you won't be able to drive down the street anymore. And I think that it's always the thing that you wish you did differently or that you couldn't control that stands out. It's never the things that are really actually pretty healthy. I mean, you notice it, but it's the thing that stands out that you go, shit. What are you going to do?
well, there's that. But then there's the things that make you proud. And when you're a part of a project like the project we worked on in the Boulder Transit Village, and it was called Spark, and we had 4 sites and paired with 2 other architecture firms to accomplish this really large entitlement and constructed neighborhood that is now built and is growing in, and you can walk down the street and see this something come to life, an actual neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it's successful, and people, constantly bring it up as one of the more successful things in town. So there's some positive aspects too.
Well, it's true. It's true. I still actually do enjoy a lot of that, most of that, and it's good. But it's not something that I go, oh, gee, look what I did. It's not.
And that might be the Buddhism part of it.
I don't know.
Or the architect part. Yeah. Well, Erin, you started this of saying a community-minded architect. What does community mean to you here? I mean, especially in Colorado, what's the sort of idea? Or hey, we're happy to be sponsored by Modern in Denver magazine. For over a decade, they've been crafting fantastically curated content on Colorado designers and projects, spreading the gospel of good design within our region.
And I love how the goal of Modern in Denver aligns with the goal of this podcast, to better build up and connect the community of Colorado designers. So go buy a copy of the magazine at your local bookstand, subscribe to their weekly email list, and follow them on Instagram.
Check it out.
For me, it's, one of the things that keeps me coming to work every day and enjoying it is that we get to work on these projects that we are experiencing and living through and seeing throughout the years and understanding how they make an effect on the community at large and how they're addressing the street and how they're, we can look down the road and see a project that we've been working on since 2015 and understand all of the easement vacations, and we moved the ditch, and it was a split zone site, and there's all the things that went into it, undergrounding of utilities, and none of that is visible except for the way it looks as a whole now, which is a very successful. I can't wait for the street to be open, or the sidewalk to be open, and the street trees to be in, because I'm going to walk down across it every day, and hopefully enjoy the experience.
Yeah.
And
it's true. It's true. Yeah. It's a good thing. Hopefully.
Hopefully. And we're working with Boulder Housing Partners, which is our affordable housing group, one of the affordable housing groups in town. And we're getting a chance to possibly do one of the first modular affordable housing projects that the city of Boulder is constructing a modular housing facility. We don't know when that's going to happen, but this project,
like a manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's just been approved. And, when it gets built, we might be one of the first projects out of the facility, which is exciting. Like, we know how long the city of Boulder has been talking about this manufactured housing facility, and to have a project that might be the first ones through the gate is just a good experience to have, and you feel those are the kind of things that make you feel part of this community and a part of the conversations.
Yeah, and able to build towards it. Yeah.
I will say that what Erin's pointing to is something that has been very, I think, special for us, which is that we've been able to work on projects in this small community that we live in, small by standards of where I grew up and probably Erin as well, and have relationships with people in the community, leadership of the community, city council, planning board, staff, who have been good partners in terms of helping us do the best that we can do to make these things happen. And that's very fortunate and unusual, I think. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Again, I just, this whole exercise is just me harvesting information. So I thank you for being part of it. And we've never met before, and I've wanted to meet you guys and just learn more. And so thanks for coming on here and spending your Friday. And I can continue to look forward to seeing how you build up this community. So thanks.
Thank you, Adam. You're a good
Thanks.
inquisitor.
Thanks for supporting my podcast dreams.
I don't know if I like that reference with your past story, but yeah. Thanks.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.
Hi, I'm Eli. This show is made by my mom and dad and these people.
Heidi Mendoza. Emily Child.
Fernando Queiroz.
Zach Huff. Trevor Notsko. Aaron Best.
Kyle Bruner.
Rob Cleary. All right, let's get a coffee. See ya.
Now we can hang out for a second if you have time, but before my kids come banging down the door.
Barreling through.
Yeah. Our oldest just finished kindergarten. So this is the first summer that we've had to deal with, with all that camps and things. And so
that's a big deal.
We had a 1 week gap. So I've been taking care of him and working this whole week, and it's been a long week. And
you work out of the house.
Yeah. So it's been fun. I feel like I've gotten to know him better than I have for a while, but
that's good.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff do you work on?
Single family.
Yeah.
Mostly single family. We have a few kind of smaller TI, like commercial office and retail stuff. Because we're kind of both coasts, we have 2 house renovations going on outside of Philadelphia and one in Connecticut. And we had 2 projects in Kansas and then 2 or 3 in Colorado. I'm doing my first Boulder project right now. It's a single family out kind of a little bit west of town. So I'm slowly learning the Boulder process. But what?
County.
Yep. County. Yeah. Do we miss anything? Any of those questions jump out to you?
How did you feel about it?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
How much editing do you do by chance?
Not too much. How much do you want editing?
Well, I was just kind of noting the Ryan Gold reference, and Adrian's response to it.
Oh.
Which we like. We love Ryan. He's one of our best people, and Adrian and I are both really close with him, and we work with him on everything. But Adrian's response is a very Adrian response. He was like, "Oh yeah, Ryan," and so I just don't want that to.
Oh, Ryan would know what that means.
Should we record something right now that we can splice in and be like, "Oh, that guy. He'll be lucky if he makes it a year. Another year." Yeah.
You can play it for him and see what he thinks.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Ryan wouldn't care one bit, but I mean, what if somebody else in the audience thinks that poorly?
Oh gosh, my goodness, what are we going to do?
If all 3 of our moms get upset about it, that's who listens. So,
make a big one day.
Yeah,
let's not worry about it. I was just curious
if you want to listen to it before, but
I
think he'll get it. I can tell this story in the introduction of the podcast. I can say, oof, it sounded like we were really giving Ryan a hard time, but in the end, they said they're coming around to him. So,
well, Adrian, you had some other notes too, so I don't know if his question of did we miss anything?
No, I mean, I just looked at the questions you had and wrote a few things down. It's no big deal. Some of them we covered, some of them we're incorporated broadly, and I'm not worried about anything.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the problem. It's like I could sit here and do this for 3 hours and hear all the stories I'm sure you have, Adrian, but it's hard to kind of channel it into a certain amount of time. But
No, I'm good.
I'll buy you a beer sometime, and I'd love to hear more of those. So,
I
but
look forward to it.
I went to a little party at your Denver office one time.
Oh, nice.
I forgot what those. Oh, I think it was Denver Design Week, but yeah.
Mhm.
Just had an open house there last week.
Did you go, EB?
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, I was out of town.
Nice.
It's a nice, actually, so you might have gone to the older office. We did move within the dry ice factory. We moved to the street face on Walnut.
Okay. Oh, cool.
So it's kind of a standalone. It's not accessed by the hall
Okay.
anymore.
And it's bigger than the kind of like 30 by 15.
Yeah, it's bigger. It's probably maybe 3 times that size. So
cool.
it's nice. We have about 5 people in there now.
How many people do you have total?
19 right now, I
19?
think.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Denver office is useful, as you know. It's not a lot of people live in Boulder. It's small and
Harder and harder.
unaffordable.
Yeah.
For most of us.
Yeah.
If you haven't lived here for a long time.
That question of just how to grow and when you hire your first person, Adrian, I mean, especially Adrian, like that's kind of where we're at right now, where it's like, well, we don't really have the work to have 3, but like, oh, that'd be kind of nice some days, and it's like, did that feel like a real kind of gulp moment of the first employee, or you had so much that you kind of put it off? And
it is a real question, and it had fits and starts. We actually had another partner, which was really 2 partners at one point because they were married.
I don't remember that story.
That was before your time, if you believe that exists.
I mean, I said I don't remember the story even.
Oh, well, yeah, okay. Didn't know that. I understand. Yeah. And there's stories there that I'm not sure I want to get into on a family.
This is the bonus part. This is where we can really let it out. Yeah.
This is where I learned that you are joined to your partners in a way that you better be ready for. It wasn't the first time that I learned that, but I learned it somewhat viscerally.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing of, you did 16 years with somebody and then breaking it off, like my partner and I, it's been the marriage, right? It's been a rocky year and a half. And so we're constantly talking like, oh, should we just break off, or no, I think things are good, or whatever, but like, it's interesting to see like, yeah, you can go 16 years and then say, hey, we're diverging. And, it's hard.
It's also hard to break up sometimes.
Right. It's hard to break up, and it's hard to know, like, is this the right person, right? In the very beginning, but life goes on.
One thing about that is that, and this is something that I think people these days don't know, is that the economy has a lot to do with this. And I can't remember if I've seen 5 or 6 recessions. And I think that the one that I'm counting as the 6th is not necessarily counted as a recession, and that's during COVID. We were actually busy, and the PPP helped too, but I mean, it was a crazy time. So that 6th one is maybe about to hit, but young people don't have a clue of what that's like.
Right.
And think that we're all going to be begging people to just work wherever they want to work because that's what they think that the world will allow. But a recession is a big deal in our profession.
Yeah.
And that has a big impact on partnerships too, particularly if they're challenging.
Yeah.
This is just me talking casually with.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had this conversation recently, which is why it's so fresh for Adrian. And I've been through 2 recessions. If COVID is the 3rd, we don't know. But I've definitely never seen the job market like it is right now. And being on the employer side of things, we constantly have to offer more to get employees. And, I think I assume it's at the most extreme it's ever been coming out of COVID in terms of flexibility and benefits and pay. But as Adrian noted, when a recession hits, that'll rebalance, one can imagine. And then we'll see how long all these flexible work days and COVID after effects last.
Yeah.
In the end.
I mean, I'm of the opinion that you learn a lot from other people in your working. Yeah. And if you aren't in that environment, that has an impact.
Mm-hmm. And as architects, as we have said, don't know a lot. Mm-hmm. And we're constantly learning. And when you're first out of school, you don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And so you can learn something from the team's call, from your project manager calling you and talking to you individually, but it's not the spatial knowledge of overhearing or hearing somebody on the phone or
seeing what somebody else is doing.
Right. Yeah.
I learned so much from guys in the office that you would never think that you would even talk to, working in the firms that I did, about how to do things that, oh, you're doing that. Okay. I've never seen that,
Right. Yeah. How did that affect you going to starting your own firm? Like how many years of experience working did you have before you started? It was pretty fast, right? I mean, yeah. Adrian, no?
23.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Sorry. Your LinkedIn, no. It looked like your LinkedIn said something else, but before you started Architecture Incorporated? No. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Architecture Incorporated. I 94, and I got out of, well, maybe it was not 23. It was 20. Just under 20. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a long time. Yeah.
I mean, I realized that if I was going to ever do it, I'm just going to have to do it.
You knew something. And then probably a lot of what you had to learn was the business part of it.
I had to learn the business part of it. I also knew I didn't have relationships to build on in terms of a clientele. I didn't really know so many things that I didn't know. And on the other hand, I also felt like I can learn what I need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just jumping in and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any money.
Yeah.
Money.
Right. Yeah. I graduated in 2009 from undergrad, and my wife and I got a project, and we started a firm at 23. And so I have this weird backwards career where I've started 3 firms. I've I've worked for like 8, 9 firms, but only for 2 years at a time, and just kind of bounced around however I feel like it. And so I have like a Swiss cheese experience of a bunch of gaps, but and so there's a lot of jumping, but I'm always just curious of those, there's different approaches you can take within the profession and where it ends us. But
do you still work with your wife?
No, she's at Ginsler.
Oh, got it.
So she gets me my health insurance and security and
regular paycheck,
and I give her angst and my frustrations and
childcare.
Childcare, right? Exactly. No, but yeah, thanks guys. This has been fun. So
yes. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah,
thanks for inviting us.
Yo, Alexa, play the Plug podcast. My boy Rudolph enjoys an immersive audio experience. Do you feel me? Ho, ho, ho! With Echo Studio, we can listen to any podcast or song from Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Click the link in this episode description.
Santa, check out my podcast.
Damn, even the Grinch has a podcast. Merry Christmas, ho, ho, ho.